today's episode, we're going to be talking about Agile BIM Standards. We're going to talk about, are standards important? And what's all this fuss about BIM being agile? And lastly, a case study on Agile BIM Standards. So are BIM standards really that important? And what is the reason for setting a standard? First of all, what is a standard? So here is a definition from CEN, the European Committee for Standardization. They talk about it being a technical document that has rules and guidelines and definitions, but it's really important that it's consensus built and it's repeatable. They say it's created by bringing all these parties that are interested in that same goal together, and one of the outcomes is lower transaction costs. There are many other important outcomes of having standards. Like you start to have people talking the same language. It helps us become more efficient in our workflows and gives us the ability to be consistent in our projects. We're also able to then measure our successes against something, against a standard or guide. You cannot measure your success between projects or successes unless you follow the same standards or formats or metrics, if you will. How do standards get created? Here, CEN, which is again the European Committee for Standardization, they talk about a 3-year cycle going from proposal to acceptance of proposal to drafting, inquiry, adoption by vote, publication, there's users, feedback, the whole cycle. So it's a process and a very long one as well. So 3 years is a long cycle. So what do customers say about the standards? Well, these are quotes from people in the industry, and well, some find them very complex and difficult to understand. There are many standards out there, so which one are we going to follow? And people find it difficult to implement. Some also say that these standards are too detailed in some areas and not so much in other areas, and are not practical for some of their real projects. Now remember, this is constructive criticism from actual people who wanted to solve this problem. Another one, also standards sometimes feel too fixed. It wasn't flexible enough. They had to implement by filling in the gaps here and there. So you'll notice this, and you see this a lot. The standards bodies seem to really have that barrier between them and the end users. So what does the customer have to do? What does the customer have to do? Basically, the easiest thing to do is either, well, start with a standards template or start on their own from scratch, based on their own goals and options. But then we actually end up with more and more standards out there. Some people get together and butt heads and brainstorm and come up with their own standards. And why is that? Why have so many standards out there? It happens time and again where there's good intent, but we end up creating more and more standards. And a lot of people have created their own, and over time and over the years, it has just become their company thing. And to go back and work according to other standards is complicating because you don't know what has or has not worked before. So then when people went off and created their own standards, why didn't they provide any feedback to the relevant standard bodies? Well, the process of providing feedback to the relevant bodies is such a difficult and slow one that they don't have time to process and become accredited or approved. They also need to get their work done. So that is these people from the relevant bodies. So we see these challenges where it is a disconnected loop, very slow, as you can see, taking years for something to be included in a standard. People who have volunteered to be part of this process also have their day jobs and deadlines and projects to tend to. So with all these challenges, people just go off and create their own. And when we see this happening, it's because people have their own users. Also, they have a different pace of change. For example, we see BIM experts now that are creating new tools and ways of doing things that might not correspond to the standards that have been created in the past. We see different goals from different companies, different universities all over the world that have adopted BIM and have their own standards, which is great. But having a different standard for every different university you work with is not as productive for the teams that are delivering and for the customer of the standards as it could be. We have consultants that are helping teams create standards and specifications. So it can be quite complex. These different reasons that people create their standards and the pace in which they can make change differs drastically between these groups as well. So what does it mean to be agile? And how can being agile help? Agility in this regard is all about having smaller batches and sprints that are not months long, but rather weeks or sometimes even days long, which allow you to iterate and improve things a lot more rapidly and provide feedback to the people who are making the improvements and keep on improving rather than bottling up and having a backlog of all of those changes and updates and improving and waiting a long time to share that with the end user. So you see the waterfall method at the top versus this agile iterative plan of do, act, and check approach, which when it comes to applying lean principles is really, really great. The top method being a year, and at the bottom, months or even weeks. We have heard many times that it is difficult to get feedback from a large document, but it's so much easier to, for example, give feedback one page at a time. So it's not just the groups creating the standard, it's also a set of experts who have a passion for solving the same problem and others who can operate or who are operating outside of those feedback loops, as you can see. They can also provide some valuable additional feedback if they are all operating in a common framework with a common cause and common agreement. So what would we need? It would be great to have a common platform or framework so that everyone will be talking the same language, and it would be great to have it be integrated. So when an update was made, it would have to be transferred, or it wouldn't have to be transferred in a different form or sent by another method, and it could be worked on more quickly. And although there are a lot of standards on the Planoly platform, there are a lot. There's a lot of the ISO standards as well. Planoly are very excited to actually have standards from an actual standards body that has joined Planoly as well. So a case study was done with John Russo, who is the president of the USIBD, which is the US Institute of Building Documentation, who has implemented this new agile way of standards management. So the initial goal was to get rid of that 2-year-long cycle of advancing the building standards and have a platform or framework to deliver these standards faster and be able to make those updates meaningful to the people that are going to use them. And up until now, as we have discussed, it has been such a manual process until now that it is actually on the Planoly platform. This has now made it easier for us to learn these standards and provide feedback, what's working and what's not. And before it was just a one-way street. You submit standards and the body provides a document. Now it's a live document where you can submit, receive updates, and provide feedback instantly. So some people say that standards should be set in stone, but the way the process works is that once something has been approved by the body, it is then incorporated, and everyone will receive the update instantly. So there is versioning that goes with the updates as well. And also important, it can be PDF'd after the updates as well for those who need those hard copies. The LOA template is available as one of the modules and templates within the platform. The status of a specific section, when it was last updated, information about it, being able to provide comment on what you see and giving some good feedback to the body as well. So when you start your own project, you are able to use and reference any of those standards that have been shared. It's the level of accuracy one, and being able to search through those standards in your scope, in your project, and use that content for yourself. So in conclusion, standards can be fun. We must streamline standards development, as we have seen. There can now be a direct connection between customer and a standards body. So we know we have to allow it to be agile but controlled. There has to be development. The customers must be heard. And Planoly has helped drive that forward. Now, there could be no more of those barriers between the standards bodies and the customers or end users. And customers will be enthused and see the results of their impact as feedbacks and updates can now be live. You don't have to wait 3 years for it to happen. And here are some resources to help your BIM team grow. So follow the link to get more information on Planoly. The link is in the chat. Book your masterclass accreditation sessions with us now. So look out for our next webinar, which will be about building lean BIM standards.